My name is Beth Flowers, and I'm volunteering to be your session moderator today. So thank you so much for joining this session, Introduction to Artists Thrive. We definitely invite you to turn on your camera if you're comfortable and able to join by video. But to minimize background noise, we ask that everyone please stay muted when you're not talking. If you would like to ask a question, there are a couple of ways that you can do that. If you all see at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to click on a participants link, and you should see all of the participants in a list off to the right, and you will be able to see that in that little spot, you can actually raise your hand. So if you want to raise your hand, if you have a question, you can do that over in that participant area. You can also go ahead and put a question into the chat box as well. We'll be addressing some of those questions throughout the session, but Casey also has a formal Q&A portion at the end of this session as well. If you are having any tech or connectivity issues with the event software, we really suggest that you take a moment to go ahead and switch over to your Chrome browser. It may also be helpful to follow the direct Zoom meeting invite, which is in the session description. So we hope you enjoy this session, and I'm going to turn everything over to Casey, who's going to get us all introduced to Artists Thrive.
Wonderful. Welcome. It's great to see all of you, some familiar faces and names, and some new folks as well. So my name is Casey Summer. I consult with the Artists Thrive Project. By night, by day, I'm an attorney with the law firm for nonprofits in Santa Barbara, California. So before we jump into the Artists Thrive overview, I did want to take just a moment for us to get to know each other a bit better, as we are all far-flung in this format. So for this activity, this is also a good opportunity for you to get comfortable using the raise hands feature. So open your participants tab, and we'll use the raise hand feature for this. As Beth mentioned, it's on the bottom of the taskbar in Zoom. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and if it applies to you, just raise your hand, and we should all be able to see the raised hands if you have that participant tab open. So after each question, I'll give a chance to see who's raising their hand, then we'll lower them, ask the next question, okay? So first, let's just get a sense of where we are all joining from today. So raise hand if you live in the, or if you're joining us from the New England or Mid-Atlantic region. Raise hand, okay. Got a few folks popping up. All right, let's put those down. All right, let's raise your hand next if you are in the Southeast. A lot of folks from the Southeast. Yeah, fantastic. All right, great. We've got a good chunk of folks in the Southeast. Okay, next, let's raise your hand. Let's put this down. And then let's raise your hand if you are in the Mid-America region. Who's joining us from Mid-America? There's Sue. I know Sue's calling from Mid-America. A few other folks. Wonderful. Okay, hands down. Let's raise your hand if you are out on the West Coast with me. Hands up for the West Coast folks, where it's morning time for us. Yeah. Okay, a few of us. Great. All right, and last, raise your hand if you are in the Southwest. Do you have anyone joining from the Southwest? Yeah, okay, wow, this is amazing. And last, is anyone joining us from outside the US? Any folks outside the US? Okay, not in this group. Wow, amazing. So what I saw, if you all were following, that was a really even smattering of people from all over the country. This is incredible. So I'd love to also know a little bit more about how you identify in coming to this work, and feel free to raise your hand for more than one of these, because I know many of us wear more than one hat. So first, raise your hand if you are an artist. Hand raises going up. Artist, wonderful. Okay, what about if you are an arts administrator? One of our arts admin folks. Lots of hands going up, going up, going up. Awesome. Okay, good chunk of, yeah, it looks like at least a third of us, maybe a half of us are arts administrators. What about educators? Let's see hands from educators on the call. Okay, nice. Got a nice contingency of educators. Love it. All right. And what else? What did we miss? Does anyone want to come off mute or chat about any groups that we might have missed? Brave. Anyone feeling like we left a big group of folks out? Okay. What about last? I'd love to know, raise your hand if you have used Artist Thrive in your work yet. Let's see who's using Artist Thrive or who's tried it out yet. Great, a few folks. Wonderful. And then what about, let's raise your hand if you are new to Artist Thrive. So what if you're just getting to know Artist Thrive? Awesome. You're in the right place. Love it. Oh, very cool. Okay, I love this. I could do this all day, but we won't. Okay, so now we have tested out the hand raise button. So hopefully you're comfortable with that. And we have a bit of a feel of who is in our virtual room today. So I would love to hear from just a few of you, people that are feeling willing to go off mute. Raise your hand and then we'll call on you. And if you'd rather chat your answer, you could do that as well. And we'll get those from there. So I know that we're all, coming from different places, clearly all over the US and a far flung. So, whether you're, in your office, your house, maybe you're in the park, maybe you're calling from the car, we'd love to connect together wherever we are by sharing something about your current view and if there's something that strikes you about it. So it could be what you're gazing at in the distance right now, something that is in your periphery, something maybe you haven't actually stopped to look at lately. So I'd love to hear from just one or two folks who might want to share something that strikes you about what your current view is right now. Anyone want to volunteer? Let's see, do we have any raised hands? Who wants to share a little bit about what they're looking at right now, other than this screen full of folks? Okay, here Beatrice shared. She has lots of lovely vases of flowers around her. That's a nice image. I like thinking about that. Monica is saying, oh, it's wet and foggy where she is. Nice. I woke up to fog here as well, but it is burning off as we speak. So my screen will be getting lighter and lighter. The sun's coming out. Love it. Anyone else want to share what they are seeing, what they're thinking about? Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you for this. It's nice to, again, get a little bit more of a connection with each other before we dive out. Oh, Tammy says it's autumn in Colorado. She's looking at falling leaves. Love that. Well, feel free to share those. Let's see. Kate says, raise hands not working. Okay, but I'm glad your chat is, and it's a beautiful day there in Lafayette, Colorado. And Liz is in a converted bedroom, now the COVID office with trees outside. Who can relate to the converted COVID office, right? I know we're all finding that. I've inherited my husband's writing studio that he got to decorate before I did. So my background's really interesting here. But all right, great. Thank you all. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being here and being part of this session. Hopefully this gets you kind of warmed up and willing to jump in, to use the chat, to use your raise hand. While I do have a formal presentation, I really welcome questions. If you'd rather hang on to them till the end, that is just fine. I'll be sure to save a few minutes. But if you have something that's really would make more sense to ask in the moment, about the slide I'm talking about or the current topic, please feel free to do that. And also, as you're getting familiar with kind of connecting with people, one of the things I really love about the way the summit has been designed, there are a ton of different ways for us to connect with each other. There are one-on-one networking options in the attendee section. There are speed meetings. There are different kind of open space discussion. There are arts experiences. So there are a ton of different ways we can connect during this outside of the session. So I hope you take advantage of that. All right, wonderful. Well, let's get going. Perfect. So our agenda for this, our next little bit together, about 40 minutes together, we're going to talk about what is Artist Thrive. We're going to get you comfortable with Artist Thrive itself. And then we're really going to dig into using the tools and going to talk about how people are using them. I want to hear from you if you have ideas to add to that. And then at the end, I will touch on a few other Artist Thrive Summit sessions that might be of interest if you are in this boat of really wanting to get your head around what is Artist Thrive and how can I use it. So there'll be some helpful topics coming up. So what is Artist Thrive? So Artists Thrive really it's a growing initiative, and it offers activities, practices, language, vision, and values of what it means to succeed and thrive as an artist, and what it means as a thriving arts, to have a thriving arts sector, and ultimately thriving communities. So more specifically, I think of it as a set of interconnected, holistic resources that can guide us in improving our performance and ultimately the conditions in which artists thrive. So there's a lot of language there. Some of it's a little bit jargony, right? So, what are we really talking about? What's the goal here? So the goal I think of is Artists Thrive is really about trying to change the narrative throughout the entire sector. And the ultimate goal is to raise the value of artists in every community. So we want communities across the country, across the world, to really understand, appreciate, celebrate the value of artists to their community. We're really trying to shift the way that we think about the role of artists in our community and the way that we talk about artists in our community. So, we'll get into more detail in just a few moments, but I would think of Artists Thrive from a big picture as a navigation system. And what I mean by that is it helps you navigate your work, whether as an individual artist or as an arts organization. It helps us see kind of where we are in our work. So there's that assessment piece. It helps us see where we want to go, because as we'll see, the tools themselves create a picture of thriving with them. So it kind of gives you a vision of a future destination where you want to go. It helps us think about what is important for us to measure. And we'll look more at that in just a moment. And then how we can improve in ways that really benefit and support everyone involved. So it becomes this really great iterative process. So knowing this is still a little obscure, but here are some key takeaways, and then we'll really dive into the tools themselves. So Artists Thrive, what is it? Wow, so much here. Big picture, it's a national tool, right? It's a national tool. We're trying to change conditions for artists and communities. It's imagining the world we want to see, a world in which artists are really valued in every community. And it helps us plan backwards from there to think about how to get there. So what it is, it's aligning our goals. I think of it as a coach, right? So it's coaching our performance to get there. And a neat thing about Artists Thrive is, it says here was built by the users, and I would say is continuing to be built by the users. So it is not set in stone. It is something that continues to evolve as people use it, as they share it. The language continues to grow with us, which is really, which I think is really helpful to keep in mind that it is fluid. The site itself, using artistthrive.org itself, it's free, and there's no login either. So it really is the type of thing you can just go to and immediately interact with. No one's collecting your data. There's no other end goal here. This is a tool for you. It's really designed, as it says, for honest self-reflection. So something that you can take, use however you want to. It invites you to customize the content while we're all working collaboratively on this shared language. It's also the type of tool that you can take, use pieces of, customize pieces of it, and really kind of flow in and out of. So I think that's helpful too. You can use what's useful for you and not feel obligated, to use the rest or to sort of follow a particular program. It's not, there's nothing being sold to you. There's no other agenda. And it really does start to introduce this shared language. So that's something that we've all been working on together. For those of you that have attended past summits, for those of you that are new to this, out of each summit, we are finding new shared language, new kind of standards, new practices that we're all sharing. And Artists Thrive is a great vehicle for introducing that as you go back to your community. It's a tool for that. It also supports professional development, both as an individual artist and as someone working as an arts administrator. It's a great tool for that. And one of my favorite things about it is it really sets the stage for conversation and action, but it's a great conversation starter. So if you find that you're really wanting to have a conversation in your community, whether with fellow artists, whether with funders, with city administrators, whoever it might be. It's a way to start the conversation. You reflect on this tool, you use it, you share the language, and it starts that conversation about the conditions for artists in your community. And then that leads to actions that could be taken both at the individual level, organizationally, or at the systems level. So a lot of different conversations that can come out of this, starting from a conversation with yourself about where you are at this moment on the spectrum, and then growing to conversations with others. So Artist Thrive, when we say who, right, we say the initiative, it's a growing initiative. So this is a map where we map collaborators. These are people that are using Artist Thrive, that are engaging with us, that are presenting about Artist Thrive in their community. So you're seeing there's a ton of folks all over, just like on this call, it's reflecting people from all over the US. We've got Alaska covered. And what that means is this is organizations and artists across the country who have been contributing to this, and the network is continuing to grow. We'd love to, add you to this map, as someone who is connecting, sharing this with people in your community. So it's a set of tools. Again, the tools are not the end. So the tools are about starting the conversation. They're a way to connect with others. They're a way to really plan a future path that is changing the conditions for artists and supporting their ability to thrive. So I'm going to give you a couple thoughts about the framework and how we created this particular tool, and then we'll start looking at them themselves. So the Iceberg model, some of you might have heard this before. And just in case you're squinting your eyes here, this text here is repeating the smaller text here on the side. So in case that's hard to read on the graphic itself, that's just the same text repeated over here. So what we mean when we talk about the Iceberg model. So we're thinking for a moment about systems of assessment. So what the Iceberg model is teaching us is that below our actions, below our patterns of behavior, and below our structure of our systems, there are these mental models that really shape our work. And to make real change, that's where we need to shift. So let's unpack this a little bit. So the first part of the iceberg, the little bit that we see up top, are, these are the events, these are the actions that are happening in the world. However, if you go just below the surface, this is that part of the iceberg that you don't actually see, you can start to feel. If you go one level deeper, you see that there are events that are really driven by certain patterns of behavior. So this is, I think of as when we start to see trends. So the events are really reacting to what we're seeing in the moment. The patterns of behavior are where you start to see trends for events that have been happening over time. So that's our pattern. If you go below that, but what's really driving the pattern, you see that looking a level deeper to system structure, we see that those patterns of behavior are actually influenced by the structure of the system we are operating in, right? So they're not created in a vacuum, they're not random, they're influenced by those system structures. And then if we look even below the systems and we're asking, why are the systems structured this way? What are the parts? What is influencing this? What's creating this? That's where we get to the deepest level, which are our mental models. So this is where we get to values, assumptions, beliefs. These are the mental models that created the systems, that created the structure of that system. So what the iceberg is teaching us, what the whole concept behind the iceberg model is, that these events that we see day to day, we can't simply react to and respond to those. We can't try to change at the event level, right? Because that's a very reactive place to be. To really try to make meaningful change, we have to go all the way deeper than those patterns, deeper than the system structure, to the mental models to understand why we have the systems we have and how we can impact our patterns of behavior. So that's the level that Artist Thrive is operating at, right? We're really trying to start to shift that, to increase that leverage and shift the mental model. So when we talk about something like raising the value of artists in every community, that's a mental model, right? That's shifting how we value something. It's often shifting assumptions about artists. It might be shifting pre-existing beliefs that people have about the role of artists in their communities, about the value of artists in their communities. So, big goals, big goals with this movement. That's why this is a, a nationwide and international initiative, and we invite everyone in. So the Artist Thrive Initiative is grounded in the work of David Grant. So David Grant wrote this book, The Social Profit Handbook, and really the revolutionary concept that comes out of David's book that informs Artists Thrive is to this, the question, of course, is, well, how do we shift a mental model? How do we make that kind of deep and lasting change? And what what David says in his book is, it's all about, if you measure what you value, people will value what you measure. So to that question of how do we change what people value, this argument is you measure it, right? You measure what you value, and then people will value what you measure. So the goal of Artists Thrive really is framing for us what we value in our artist. And this, it's actually the tool is called a formative assessment rubric, but it's laying out descriptions that go from when we're underachieving in our supportive artist or as artists, or when we are thriving in a way. And the idea with the spectrum is that it places ourselves on the tool. We see where we're at, but the tool also describes a path to improvement itself. So let's talk for a moment about this. So when we're saying how do we measure what matters, right? So we know, okay, so the concept is we want to shift what people value. Well, to shift what people value, we want to shift what we're measuring. Well, how do we measure something that is quote unquote unmeasurable, right? The types of things we're describing are very difficult to measure in the abstract. So that is where this concept of rubrics come into play. How many of you are familiar with the concept of rubrics or formative assessment? Make sure we can see some hand raises. Are rubrics familiar to many folks on this call? Just a few hands going up, but not a ton. So I want to take just a moment here. So a rubric in its simplest form, it's just a grid that offers a spectrum, as the slide shows here, from lack of success through kind of status quo to success, to an ultimate vision of outstanding success. And the concept with the measurement here is that it's specifically describing what each level looks like. And so what that means, so we're specifically describing, we're really digging in and saying, what does it look like when we're not successful in this space? What does it look like when artists are struggling in our community? And the rubric itself, the language in these grids, really specifically describes what that looks like. You can add qualitative data to this. So that basically meaning just a story or testimonial anecdote. So sometimes the best description can be someone's personal story of how they are experiencing this. You could include anecdotes like that. You can also include, quantitative data. And certainly, in the art space, we're good at quantitative data, right? We're good at tracking attendance, tracking numbers. You can include that, and that's fine, that's helpful. But you can include both. And so I think that's where this really, the rubric tool excels in the art space, because often, I know I've when I was in an arts administrator role, I felt very frustrated with, quantitative measurement, that it wasn't getting it, right? So just saying, how many people attended or how many participants we had wasn't telling the full story. So the rubric allows you to tell the full story. You can include that quantitative metric, but also the qualitative, what it felt like, what it smelled like, what it looked like, what it tastes like. And so by laying this out in advance, by describing success and outstanding success that we haven't even achieved yet, it helps us envision what that looks like. So it gives us this really specific vision of what outstanding success looks like, what the future is, the world we want to see. And once we have that really specific vision of the world we want to see, we can plan backwards from there to determine how to get there. So we have that vision out in front of us, and then we can work backwards to translate that vision into action, to think about what actions, conditions would need to happen for us to get there. The other thing to keep in mind with rubrics, and this can be frustrating for some folks, is that rubrics are always in a draft state. The reason being that as you start to achieve success, the rubric will change, right? The rubric, as so if you think about the Artist Thrive rubric, as we start to make meaningful strides in this work, as we start to shift the way artists are valued in our community, the rubric will change. Success will move further. We move the bar. We might discover that something isn't aligning, so we'll revise it. We might find that the text isn't fully describing our goals, so we'll go back and we'll change it and we'll make it fully realizable. All right, so let's look at an example from one of the tools, and this is from the I Am an Artist tool. And so this is just one row, one example of the I Am an Artist rubric. And so I'm going to read the screen, and then would love to hear if anyone will volunteer after I read each of these options to share, where did you feel like you land? You could, you could feel free to share it in the chat. You could unmute and share. And so let's start there. So this category, this one is all about money. So the first category is artists give up, or the first state is artists give up. And that feels like here we describe, I am constantly pressured to donate my art and my time, and there's little or no discussion about it. So an artist struggling, we describe that looks like, I am sometimes paid for my art, but I'm uncomfortable discussing fees or prices. Okay, so artists survive, what does that look like? We describe that as, I ask for a living wage, and I'm comfortable saying no when I'm offered less than that. What does it look like when artists thrive? So we describe that as, I am paid a living wage unless I choose to make a donation. I pay fellow artists a living wage, and I advocate for fair pay. So does any of this ring true for you? Does anyone want to share? Let's see, there's something coming up in the chat. Okay, got some questions resolved here. Perfect. Does anyone, where do you feel like you or most of the artists would land on this spectrum and this conversation about, living wage, donating your time? All right, I see an oof. I definitely fall into the give up or struggle category. Got another, Monica's identifying with struggle for her. Sometimes one, right? So we have a lot of people really relating to this concept of, I feel constantly pressured to donate my art and my time, little or no discussion, or, sometimes I'm paid, but I'm still uncomfortable discussing fees or prices. Yeah, people are saying I see a lot of struggle, particularly with early career artists. Cynthia's sharing that. Great. So, so can you see how a tool that provides many categories and rows like this could be helpful, right? Because it's hard to really, instead of just saying, we feel like artists are struggling or artists aren't being compensated well in our community, we start to describe that and say, well, this is what we need. This is what that looks like. This is what that feels like. We feel pressure or we feel discomfort. This is, how we can describe that more specifically. Does anyone else want to share on this before we go forward and looking at the tools? Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure no one else is ready to jump right in. Perfect. So a couple more things to touch on, and we'll look at a couple other rows together. Oh, yeah.
Casey, Nathan had a question.
Oh, wonderful.
Not so much a question, just kind of, it's interesting when I look at the, those different categories. I feel like as an administrator, I land and feel like I'm kind of in that survive or thrive, because I do try to help artists get paid an appropriate wage for the projects that we do. Within my own artwork, I often do things for free, or or ask barely enough to make ends meet in terms of the project. So it's an interesting thing, depending on the hat that you're wearing. But of course, we like to see artists getting paid, and I want to see them making enough that they can consider it their full profession to do the art form that they're focused upon.
Right. Now, I really appreciate you sharing that, Nathan, though, that it's, sometimes it's kind of the cobbler's shoes, right? So, we might practice one thing, but then still are, accepting less for ourselves as individual artists. So it's always it's a spectrum, and it's fluid too. And one day you may feel like you're falling more here, and another day you may feel like you're falling more on another side of the spectrum. And that's something else that I like about this is you can come back to it again and again, and you can really start to see, you can reflect on progress, you can reflect on kind of ups and downs in your career. So as we mentioned, it's your navigation system. So this is a way to help us see where we are in our work, where we want to go, what's important to measure, and how we can improve. So the suite of tools includes right now 2 rubrics. So we have one for those who work with artists and one for artists themselves, so the I am an artist rubric. And each of them are divided into sections by category. So the I work with artists, the categories on this right now are engaging with artists, services and programs, paying artists, community connections, advocacy, funding individual artists, power, organizational capacity. And then in gray here is self-care, because that's coming soon. And then on I am an artist, right now we have practice, power, planning and capacity, money, that was where the row we just looked at came from that category, communicating and connecting, and we're also adding self-care here. So again, that reflects the draft nature of the rubric. It continues to evolve. So as people start to use this nationwide, we got the feedback, you know, self-care is really missing from this. So we're fleshing that out. So it's starting to come. So let's look at another of these. This is also from the money category. So I'm going to read these and see if any of the statements resonate with you. And we'll go through and see, you know, what people's thoughts are on this. So money, starting with artists give up. I have no idea what rates to charge. At the artist struggle level, I have a sense of what I can charge based on what others have told me. At the artist survive level, we have, I know what my life cost annually and what an hour, day, and week of my time cost. That's artist surviving. And artist thriving, I know my rates and I make strategic mission-based choices to ask for more or work for less or free. So what do you think? What feels, sorry, rolled ahead there with my mouse. So let's see. So oh great, so I'm hearing in the chat people are glad we added self-care. That's great. So Cynthia's saying that their self-care education programs have been really popular right now. Thank you, that's great feedback. And we really welcome, I can't stress more emphatically how much we welcome feedback on this. So, you know, if you're seeing something that doesn't connect with you, that doesn't resonate, or you have questions about it, or something's missing, let us know. We want to integrate that into the work. So how is this row connecting with people? Is it resonating? Feel free to, you know, feel free, let's see, we could use raise hands. Did anyone feel like they were at the give up level? Any hand raises for that? I feel like they resonate with the, oh, sorry, I keep doing that when I scroll to the bottom of my participants there. Anyone feel like they really are, you know, connecting with, I have no idea what rates to charge? A few folks. What about artist struggles? I have a sense of what I can charge. It's really based on what others have told me. Is that when people are feeling? Looks like a few folks there. I like, you know, Daniel's sharing in the chat, I've experienced all levels, right? Isn't that, you know, I get that, right? That's something that, again, it can change, you know, year to year, month to month, day to day. And what about artists survive? Any raises of the hand for, I know what my life cost annually, what an hour, day, and week of my time cost? Great, a couple of folks there. And so what about thrive? Anyone feel like they're really thriving, that they really connect with the language there? Right, and some of it's aspirational too. You know, we always want thrive to be, we want thrive to be out there in such a way that it really inspires us, you know, to go further. So anytime thrive starts to feel like the status quo, then we need a new rubric. We need to continue to build on. A couple of folks saying, oh, interesting, it's kind of a hybrid. Yeah, I feel that. I know what my life costs annually, but I also don't know how to ask for the rates. Okay, so kind of a 3-in-1 where it's, I know what I need to charge, but I don't know how to actually ask for it. I get that, I feel that. Great, did we have anyone want to, was that anyone want to chime in with a question, or were they relating to that? I think that was Michael relating to that. Yeah, absolutely. So some people were saying yes, relate to that. Great. Let's look at a couple more. Okay, so this is from the I work with artist rubric. So for the arts administrators out there, this is about, this is from the engaging with artist questions. So see if any of these resonate with you. So in the artists give up, artists do not seek us out. Okay, so our organization, artists do not seek us out. At the artist struggle space on the spectrum, artists only seek us out as a last resort, okay? The artists survive. Artists call us for guidance and to share their insights, successes, and challenges. So when artists are surviving in our community, that's how we're engaging with artists. And artists thrive would be artists actively engage with us as their partners in all aspects of their practice. So do any of these resonate with folks? Anyone want to share an example of where they fit or where they felt like they were at on this spectrum? From give up to struggle to survive to thrive. All right, so Kate's saying she feels like they're at survive. So artists call for guidance and to share their insights, successes, and challenges. I'm seeing a couple heads nodding on that one. And yeah. Anna's saying, you know, artists survive, but some don't know how we can help, so they don't reach out. Interesting. So yeah, so some are connecting and they're in that survive space, but some don't know how the organization can help. Dara's saying between give up and struggle. So really feeling like artists either don't seek them out or only as a last resort. And then Liz is saying, yeah, the artists are really at all levels of the spectrum that they've got and that they're working with. Great. So I think we're relating with a lot of these. Let's look at one more of these together. And this is from the I Work with Artists tool. And this is from advocacy. So this is one of the categories on that tool is advocacy. So in the artist give up, we assume that we are aware of artist issues. That's our advocacy mindset. Artists struggle. We don't have mechanisms for fully understanding artist issues and perspectives. At Artists Thrive, we have some mechanisms for seeking and understanding artists' issues and perspectives. We have some. And then Artists Thrive, we have robust outreach and mechanisms for seeking and understanding artist issues and perspectives. Where do people feel like they fall on the advocacy spectrum? Let's see. It feels like they relate at the give up or struggle levels. Anyone feel like there's really not either they're assuming that they know or they don't really have mechanisms for fully understanding issues? I've seen a ton of hand raises on that. Yeah, they're saying yeah, we feel that. She's feeling that, right? What about at the artist survive level? Folks feel like they have some mechanisms for seeking and understanding artist issues and perspectives. Hand raises on that one. Great. So Anna's saying she feels like it's really a mix of give up, struggle, and survive. So maybe, on some issues or aspects, having better understanding than others. Yeah, great. So, this is just kind of a grounding and orientation in the tools. I want to just take a moment to, Ebony's saying she's feeling that spectrum to you, a range of running from give up to struggle to survive. That there are some of those areas where we're assuming we're aware of it, and others. Cheryl's sharing an example. It's really helpful. She said, we've offered an online art directory, but only a few artists have completed the form. Yeah, so feeling that. Great. So these are great examples. I really love hearing how this is resonating with you, how you're connecting with it. So I did want to take just a moment to give you a sense of how to actually kind of navigate the website itself and how this might be useful for you all. So I'm going to just go through this on some slides. And so this is artistthrive.org. When you go to artistthrive.org, I just wanted to highlight a few things that are helpful. So on the site, you'll see a host of COVID-19 resources, but then you've got the self-assess tab. And so this is essentially, you can go to the site to self-assess by taking the Artist Thrive surveys. You can locate a ton of resources. You can hear or read stories from others. So there is a really robust network of stories that we have collected on the Artist Thrive site that are connected with the rubric, so at all levels. So just kind of like the sharing we were just doing now, like the example that Cheryl just gave, you'll see those stories are collected here. So when we were, and that really helps us get even richer in describing what it looks like, what it feels like at each stage from struggle, from give up to struggle to survive to thrive. So we have all these stories of people saying, this is exactly how I feel in that space. And there's also information about the summit, which is great. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. So let's look at what a couple of these, I just want to highlight a couple pieces here. So under the self-assess tab, the main actions you would do there are to actually take the survey itself. You can, what's neat when you're taking the survey, you can take the whole survey, either the I work with artists or the I am an artist survey, or you can actually just select a category and just answer a few of those questions. So it doesn't require that you complete the entire thing. So you can just jump in, answer a few quick questions. Let's say that you're, really reflecting on, I've got the money category on the brain because we were just looking at that. So you're an individual artist, you're doing a little budgeting, you're thinking about your relationship with money. You could pop in and just do that category and pop out. So you can use it how it's useful for you. And then as you complete just a few questions, you can actually then jump to the bottom and just see that grid, see where you fell on that, that spectrum. You can also, available at the self-assess, you can print the whole survey. Or you can also print a blank template. This is another really interesting way that people are actually using Artists Thrive, is by creating their own. So saying, okay, some of this language connects with me, some of it doesn't, or this isn't how I describe, a struggling or success for me. So I want to actually create my own. And I love that. So you can actually print a blank template that you can use to do your own. And then let's look at the, so implement, the main things that we would go to here. So implement, there are frequently asked questions, which are really helpful. So lots of FAQs, and those are framed both. Those are both questions you may have, but also if you are taking this content and sharing it with others, you may find that it helps you. You may feel better prepared to answer questions other people might have as well. So you might check out those FAQs. There are also workshop activities. So what that means is, so let's say you're thinking, okay, I'd like to use this. Maybe you are an artist that convenes a handful of other artists or a large group of other artists at a monthly meetup or some other type of activity. Maybe you are an arts administrator who has, regular opportunities to convene and share with artists. There are actually sort of workshops in a box, right? So there are instructions for how you could lead. There are 6 of these where you could lead different conversations with either artists or community members about Artists Thrive. And within the workshop activities, or even, if there are handouts you need, they're printed out. There's guidance for moderators right there. So it's something you can just kind of open, and you have everything that you need to do a workshop around Artists Thrive. And there are 6 different ones. So different options, whether you're working primarily, like I said, with the community, and you just want to spark conversation about artists in the community and how that your community values them, or whether you're working with individual artists, or whether you're bringing this within your organization. There are different options for each of those. And then all kinds of downloadable resources. So tons of things that are useful as far as, where to get started and things like that. And then last, at the take action piece. So this is where, you really start thinking, okay, so I've looked at this, I'm feeling inspired, I want to move forward on my own personal spectrum. I've assessed where I'm at. That's where the stories really come into play. So there's a ton of those stories. That's where there is also a wiki of a ton of resources for artists and arts administrators. There's a great resource there. And there's also a place that you can share your story as well. So we're always collecting and inviting those stories, which is really welcome. And last, there's the Summit tab as well, where you can learn. So hopefully you've all been there, but there's a ton of good information and resources there about this year's Summit and future Summit. So before we start with the Q&A, I wanted to just share a few ways that the community is using Artists Thrive. So the big space I've seen around these are things like self-improvement. So it's an opportunity to reflect on kind of your strengths and needs. It's helping find balance. It might be used to focus your decision making. You're trying to decide where to focus your energies, and this is a great tool for that. Funding, it can really help start conversations about what resources you need. In the advocacy space, certainly Artists Thrive itself is a tool for raising awareness, sparking conversations about justice and equity, increasing participation. It can be used for policy reform. It's being used by funders really to share best practices in the field. I'm also seeing in the organizational space, a lot of opportunities here. You can use it to evaluate your programs. How responsive are they being to artists in the community? You can use it for strategic planning to identify what the needs are of artists in the community. It's about, it's a tool for measuring what matters. It's a tool for dialogue with your constituents. And last thing, collaboration. I think it's a really robust tool for collaboration because it can create the foundation for really effective and reciprocal partnerships because you're using and building off this shared language. Certainly a way to fill in the gaps as you're working to change conditions for artists to thrive. It's a way to look and see how you could collaborate to gap fill and really develop those cross-sector relationships. It's sparking a ton of conversation. And again, we want to hear how else it might be useful. So you tell us how you're using it. You tell us how you've customized it, adapted it, and used it in your situations. Perfect. So one last tidbit before I pause for questions and thoughts. There are other summit sessions coming up that could be useful. So if you're on this, I really wanted, my goal with the Artist Rise Summit is to get a deep dive, a sense of how to use these tools. A few other sessions you might be interested in. So at 1:30 Eastern time today, there's Introduction to Rubric Building with David Grant. David's the man when it comes to rubrics. So if you're interested in this, you should spend some time with David. I learn something from him every time I have the opportunity to hear from him. That'll be a great session. And then Wednesday, tomorrow afternoon, we have some really, really powerful and interesting conversations. At 3 o'clock, we have I Was Here, which is about a vision for kind of shifting the spirit of the country. So talking about some of this big transformative change. And then at 4 o'clock, we have a wonderful conversation about dismantling power. And you'll see a similar theme here with the journey, not a destination, to talking about process and big system shifts there. And then Thursday at 1:30 Eastern time, we have another session with David Grant that is taking rubrics home. And this is really about, not just a kind of intro of how do you build a rubric, but this is really getting to understanding how to start using them yourself. And then last, for the end of the day, Thursday at 3, there will be a discussion opportunity about how people are going to use Artist Thrive or already using Artist Thrive in your reopening as we're all coming out of or still in this tricky time. So, okay, so lots of me talking there. I know we just have a few minutes left, but are there any questions? Are there thoughts people want to share as far as, what did you think of the survey questions?
Casey,
yeah.
I think Jim may have a question.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Or maybe not.
Okay. If anyone has a question, jump right in. And also, in addition to question, like I said, we're just inviting thoughts. Can you envision yourself going through a full list of questions like the ones that I shared? So in the survey format, the rubric is split up into questions where you choose, which of the states that you feel like you fit in, that then allows you to build your own kind of customized rubric where you see, okay, most of my responses are falling in give up or struggle or survive or thrive. So again, it's a tool to get you thinking, to start conversations. It's about spurring action and ultimately helping us all improve, right? Because we can all improve. There's work for all of us to do in this space to raise the value of artists in all of our communities. So a lot there. And I think also the kind of conversations that we just had today, these are examples of, how the kind of stories that you'll find from there. So I see Cammie's asking, do you know if foreign artists living in the US are connected to Artist Thrive? Definitely. Yeah, definitely. We have had artists both in the US and outside of the US that are connecting with this work. So it's really, starting to be not just a US movement, but reaching across the world. So that's very welcome. And I would be interested to think, are there issues specific to foreign artists living in the US that might warrant their own rubric row, right? Are there things, about that? What are there different resources needed or different ways to challenge different challenges you're experiencing? That could be interesting to reflect on. And then Monica's asking, how do we move up the rubric once we assess where we would be? So that is a place that the resources part of the website can be really helpful, as well as the stories. So you'll find within the stories everything from, really bite-sized examples of how someone felt like, what was a meaningful step that they took that really helped them move from, struggle to survive. So I would dive in. A good place to start, there are videos as well as written stories in the story section of the website. website, and also a ton of resources. So dive into that wiki as well, and you'll find a lot of really practical national resources. So that's where I would start. You've honed in on that area, and now you know where to focus. You can go to those stories or go to the resources and focus. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. How fun is this? Thank you all for your time today, your engagement. I think we are closing in on, I'm getting that look from Beth. I think we're closing in on time here. So I'll turn it over, Beth. I don't know if you have any wrap up words here, but this has been a real treat, and thank you all for spending the time together.